Okay, so welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be tackling,
Oh, this is a big one.
this is one of the biggest questions out there.
One of the oldest ones.
I mean, has humanity always grappled with this?
Always, right?
Does God exist?
Is it the ultimate question?
Yeah. And so to help us unpack this question, we're diving into an episode
Love it.
of a podcast called Religion Forward Podcast.
Wait.
And the hosts, John and Sarah, have a pretty lively debate about this.
I like it already.
So whether you're, somebody who's, a devout believer or a hardcore skeptic or somewhere in between,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation to kind of listen in on.
Well, and what I find so fascinating about this whole debate is how it really gets to like the core of how we as humans like create meaning and purpose in the world.
Yeah.
You know, like it's something we all struggle with
Absolutely.
regardless of our beliefs.
Yeah. And so let's start with the basics.
Okay.
I think it's important to define our terms here.
Yeah.
John, one of the hosts on the podcast, he describes atheism as, a lack of belief in any kind of God or gods or any sort of divine being.
Right.
And for him, that comes from this idea that, he doesn't see the empirical evidence
The proof.
to support, the existence of a higher power.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of a cornerstone of the atheist perspective, right?
Right.
Like if you can't see it, touch it, measure it, how can you really say it exists?
Yeah, and that leads to a lot of other questions.
Oh, yeah.
If there isn't some sort of, divine creator, then how do we decide what's right and wrong?
Yeah.
What's the point of morality?
Huge question.
What happens to us after we die?
Exactly. And that's where Sarah, the other host, really kind of jumps in
Okay.
and starts pushing back a little bit.
So how does she approach those questions then?
Well, she's coming at it from a very different perspective, obviously. From that religious worldview. And for her, religion offers this kind of framework. For morality, like it's a set of guidelines that comes from a higher power.
Okay, it's like that moral compass,
Yeah.
that helps us navigate the world and figure out what's right and wrong.
But then if you don't subscribe to any kind of organized religion,
Yeah, where did that compass come from then?
right, where do you get that from? That's a great point. And, it seems like they get into this classic tension between science and faith.
Oh yeah, that's the big one.
And can the two coexist, or is it one or the other?
Can you embrace logic and reason and still hold on to those religious beliefs? It's a tough one.
Right.
And Sarah, she talks about, looking at the universe
Yeah.
and just how complex and intricate it is. And for her, that's a sign, that points to a divine creator.
Okay.
Like how could something so seemingly designed just, come out of nothing just by chance?
I can see how that argument would be convincing for a lot of people. Yeah, it's a powerful idea. But then, John comes back and he's like, well, hold on a second. Where's the concrete proof?
Yeah.
Like, show me the scientific evidence. And he points to all these scientific discoveries that have explained things
Yeah.
that people used to think were, the work of God.
Okay.
Like lightning,
Yeah.
People used to think that was the wrath of God. But now we understand the science behind it.
So for him, the beauty and the complexity of the universe doesn't automatically mean that there has to be some supernatural explanation.
Right. It could just be the laws of physics,
Right. But then that leads to another question. If you don't believe in a higher power, where do you find meaning? Like, what's the point of it all?
That's the existential question, right?
Right.
And Sarah, she brings up the idea of existentialism,
Well-
which basically says that, we create our own meaning in a world that might not have any inherent meaning. So it's about finding purpose in human connection, in pursuing knowledge, in experiencing the beauty of the world, in contributing to society, Life might be finite, but that makes each moment all the more precious.
I mean, that's a pretty powerful way to look at it.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about, what really matters, whether you're religious or not.
Absolutely.
But, I can also see how somebody like John might find that a little too subjective,
He argues that if morality is just something we made up, then it becomes relative. What's right for you might not be right for me. And without some kind of, ultimate authority, he's worried that things could kind of descend into chaos,
So it sounds like we've come to the end here and we still don't have an answer
Yeah.
to the big question, does God exist?
It's a question that's been debated for centuries, and it's probably going to continue to be debated for centuries more.
It sounds like both John and Sarah acknowledge that it's not an easy question
Not at all.
to answer.
And I think what makes this whole conversation so compelling is that it really forces us to confront, like, the limits of what we can know.
Yeah.
Like, if we can't definitively prove or disprove the existence of God, what does that say about our place in the cosmos, you know?
That's a lot to think about. This has been a really interesting deep dive.
I loved it.
I've really enjoyed this. So if you know anything that we talked about today resonated with you, go do some more research.
Yeah?
Maybe even check out that episode of Religion Forward podcast.
That's great, too.
And if you have any thoughts, if you've ever grappled with these questions yourself, let us know in the comments.
We'd love to hear from you.
We'd love to hear what you think. So until next time.
Keep thinking.